My wife and I bought this farm from an older widow lady who had lived here 49 years. And she did not have much money, but she had to rent the land out. In other words, people farmed it and took the crop off and paid her so much an acre for using the land until it was so worn out that it didn't produce anymore. So that was her living. And so she sold it to us very reasonable. She was a very good neighbor because we lived next door, and gave her rides to church in different places. That would have been, yeah, I'd say 60 years ago, actually. Anyway, she gave us a very good deal, and so we were able to afford it, because we just didn't have anything then. And so then we started building it up, and I know the only way to do it was to get organic matter back in the soil. So anytime I see a leaf fluttering away, I think, oh my gosh, it should be put into the soil. It shouldn't be, people put them in the garbage. It's awful, because that's tremendous fertilizer, because the roots go down and bring up minerals that you don't get otherwise. So anyway, we built it up with organic matter, and it became very productive, but it took many years. And it became, at that time we had chickens and pigs and cows, which is a diversified operation, which really was the way to farm, and it still is. People are going back to that because it utilizes the so-called waste of one, and it usually in the past, one of the three would have a better price. And you always had meat, you always had chickens, you had pork and beef and chickens, and you had milk, and you had eggs. And we put it eventually, because the rocks, as you could see, were so great and so numerous and just buried beneath the surface. It was no use trying to plow and plant corn and do the regular rotation of corn, oats, and hay, alfalfa, clover, and grass. So divided into areas where it was all grass and hay. And then I started doing rotational grazing. Every 12 hours the cows get new grass. And the manure is spread, the fertilizer where it belongs. The cows do the work. They go out and get their food. We don't have to chop it or bale it during the summer and haul it in, and all that moisture both ways. And the manure, with the manure, to make it balanced, we add a small amount of rock phosphate, natural ground rock phosphate, and this helps lock in the nitrogen and make it a balanced fertilizer. So now we do not use any fertilizer other than that, and the land gets increasingly productive. And we do not even reseed the land, most of it, because after a certain point, the nature kicks in and has that balance of clovers and grasses, and that's legumes, of course, and that's a balance that furnishes nitrogen, and it's just a tremendous hay crop. Cut off usually 2 crops of hay, and then the third crop we rotational graze until the snow flies. We listened to university for many years because they were our best friend for my father and I, College of Agriculture, and their recommendations for farming. And we thought, well, the cows don't need that protein. You buy all this extra protein, and it's very expensive. So I kept cutting down until I didn't buy any. And they still did well. And we were willing to sacrifice just a tiny bit of production. But the cow is so much healthier, and there's some money left over. Well, while all the emphasis in these farm magazines, which are funded by the big chemical companies and feed companies, say you have to have all this production, but all this input, and mostly it comes from petroleum-based products and all the transportation and, coming and going with this stuff. So we buy no chemical fertilizers, we buy no protein. And as you could see, the cows are very healthy. We have less animal health problems. Their lifespan is longer. The calves are healthier. And it's just a win-win situation. My milk goes to Cedar Grove, a private cheese factory in Plain, which is 20 miles away. And this man, Bob Wills, he could not exist or keep his factory going if he didn't have a degree in law and a degree in economics, because the big ones all want to put him under. And he has half the milk is organic, and he has another stream that is family farm friendly. All have to pasture their cows, no hormones, and so on. So it's very close. And he tries to pay top prices. And he's helped us develop a fair trade cheese project starting 13 years ago. And any of the cheese that we sell to the Family Farm Defenders, it's a fair trade price, which is $30 a hundred when we're getting right now 27, but it's been down as low as 21. But that percentage that we sell of the cheese at the end of the year, they tally that all up, and all the farmers in his plant get a share of that fair trade price. It may not be much each, but it can happen. The Cedar Grove cheese has between 35 and 40 farmers, but they are looking for organic farmers because they have a real good market. But we planted probably 100,000 trees, and some of them are now 80 foot tall on the poorest land that produces almost nothing but brush and rocks, and they are 2 and 3 foot in diameter. And so it's becoming our most valuable land, the land that was almost useless, and it's the best use of the land. The organic matter builds up over the rocks, and when it rains, we have these heavy rains. It does not wash, but months later, clear water runs out where it never did before, because it's like a sponge. And this is the way our cropland is becoming, because it's not disturbed and the roots go down very deep. Even the grasses can go very deep, and so when it's a dry spell, it will still produce. And we have a 40-acre part of our farm was in forest, and it's the most level area of our farm, the only area that's level. And so people advise that, oh boy, you must bulldoze those trees out of there and plant corn with this dark soil, and it's just perfect for corn. I didn't want to do that, so luckily the forester was a very reliable person at that time, and he said he went over it with me, and he said there's a lot of promise here, and he said you can buy land cheaper than you can bulldoze that land if you want to plant corn. And so I was overjoyed to hear that. So I practiced timber stand improvement on that area, and it's just beautiful in there. There's a lot of wildlife, and so that's a joy. And then we have these areas that we planted, and now they're big enough to harvest some. So we are able to support 36 milking cows and about 30 younger cattle of all ages. It would be 85 acres of pasture and hay. And but we're not considered a farmer because we're not out there every day with a big tractor doing all the things that conventional farmers are told to do, which only puts money in the pockets of the chemical companies and the petroleum companies and the GMO companies like Monsanto, and then there's Cargill and all these big companies. Well, I became more aware of the powers that are running this country and running all of us right down to our local people. And going to Mississippi and in the 70s this was right after the harshest part of the civil rights, and everybody left because they said, well, we've got the law, it's okay now, but it wasn't. It was really, really sad. So we helped with an exchange program, a cultural exchange program with children. And when the students started the law students, or the one law student started to leave, Beulah Washington, a black leader in Grenada, Mississippi, said, Mel, we can't end this like this. This is the only time our children have had a good relationship with a white person, and we want that to continue. And so that was 45 years ago. Children from Mississippi stayed in white homes, mostly rural, in the state of Wisconsin. And after 3 or 4 years, it got so complicated, he turned it all over to me. And it was pretty rough because we never had enough money. We had to buy old school buses and paint them and get them legal, and we would transport as many as 10 round trips per summer. So, and during that time then, I got to know the parents and other people and sat through horrendous trials where innocent black people were framed and found guilty of crimes. In one case, a discrimination lawsuit from the federal farm programs. And we actually won a case, or they did, and got the right people from Washington, some that we knew and otherwise. And that was one of the first cases that black farmers ever won, and that's almost 40 years ago. Well, that helped me to see how broad the picture is of how agriculture and urban life and factory workers and everyone fit together, because all of these people are involved in all these programs. When the National Family Farm Coalition was formed in Omaha or someplace, or Kansas City, I can't remember, but friends of mine drove out of their way from northwestern Wisconsin to come over here and pick me up, and I know they were 4 hours out of their way both ways to make sure I went to one of these organizing meetings, or maybe more than one. And of course, once I went, I was hooked, and that's how I got involved with the National Family Farm Coalition. It evolved. There were big problems along the way. Certain chief executive officers and sometimes presidents of the organization were, I would say, corrupt. They were power hungry, and they had double agendas, and people were calling each other racists and so on at a meeting we went to in Washington. And so we just simply walked out, our Wisconsin delegation. So we had a meeting that evening in the basement of the hotel, 5 of us, but 15 people came. And so that's how we formed the Family Farm Defenders 15 years ago, whatever that. We formed it to include at least 40% urban people, because we were finding our urban friends cared more about family farmers than farmers did, and understood the reason for caring about them. They can look at it from a perspective and without all the garbage and propaganda that we as family farmers get. I get 4 farm papers, and only one of them I subscribe to. And the others are totally funded by the chemical companies, the fertilizer companies, and they need readership to justify the ads. Almost all the material is written by the transnational companies, the chemical companies. Of course, they're all intertwined with interlocking directorates and all that. And most farmers don't understand that, so they're bombarded with that. And the same way with the farm programs that come out. They're funded the same way. They founded AFACT, which was founded by Monsanto. And they were part of it, but now they say it's a grassroots thing. Antibiotics are fed by the ton to cattle to make them grow faster and live in conditions of extreme overcrowding, and they won't get as sick, and if they get to a certain weight they die because they're so hyped up, so you got to be sure and sell them before that. The urban people haven't got all that, haven't had that message in front of them day and night, and so they can look at it objectively. I feel very sorry for these farmers who have nothing but that, and they're caught, and they're told you've got to expand, you've got to get bigger, you've got to use all this Roundup Ready, you've got to plant all these seeds. There's all kinds of problems they're finding now. Scientists are finding with cattle with abortions, and a lot of reproductive problems with cattle and hogs that are fed these GMO crops. Over the years, after introduction of the first GMO to enter the food chain, before it happened, was the bovine growth hormone, which was being researched at the University of Wisconsin by American Cyanamid. We went to some of these early meetings of the scientists from the university who were so excited about it. It's going to increase milk production 30%, which meant, and they said it put 30% more farmers off the land because of that much overproduction. And that wasn't the thing to tell farmers. So we listened to them, and there were a lot of flaws in what they were saying. And in the evening, it was more of a social area. As these scientists and researchers at the university started drinking and talking, they were making remarks about who could create the biggest monster because of their breakthrough. 50% of all the dairy products at that time, and that's 26 years ago, all the dairy products sold at the University of Wisconsin and the University Hospital, 50% of all the milk, the cottage cheese, the butter, everything that was manufactured in Madison at Babcock Hall and, and others, ice cream, came from these experimental cows. And no one knew about it except a small group of people. And they weren't even informed of it. Because we couldn't get any attention, I used my civil rights experience and wrote up a placard or a sign on a stick. And it said, "Do you know your guinea pigs?" and so on, for this experiment. And I forget, and then I made out some crude, at the beginning, very crude information sheets, and I would go in front of the Memorial Union and hand out this information. Some of this went to Europe within a year, and the people in Germany and other countries were so excited to see the farmers marching on the university in opposition. A couple of times, like I was on a farm in Germany and staying overnight, and they said, "We were so excited when we saw the video of the farmers marching on the university." Well, I said, "Here I am." Those are all students milling around in front of the Memorial Union. They thought it was farmers marching on the university. They said, "Well, that's what inspired us to their consumer groups and farm groups to fight," and they still are keeping up the fights. These same people, many of them that I met in Europe on that first trip, were the founders of Via Campesina, the international peasant and worker group and family farm group that now represent about 400 million people around the world. And then out of that came the food sovereignty initiative. All of this has been real helpful to learn how all these tremendous farm methods, agriculture methods, and how you combat climate change, to be working with these people who risk their lives from coming from Indonesia, for instance, and coming from many countries that are oppressed. And of course, at these meetings, there are people from Iran, and there are people from Cuba, and there are people from Bolivia. We were in Mexico to talk to the people about resisting the CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, and we were in the state of Veracruz. And the other issue was Monsanto was offering them 500 pesos per hectare to plant GMO crops. And they hadn't even heard of those things. They were so far out. This would be 3 years ago, so that would have been, this is about 07 or 08. A young man gave an account of how he migrated to the United States to work. And he had to, because of the loss of income there by NAFTA-related causes. And he, when he and his group came to the border of the U.S., the coyote who recruited them for, I think, $2,000 or $3,000, abandoned them because there was the border patrol. And so everybody ran, scattered in the desert. And he said, I never saw one of those people again. But he was able to find somehow a man from the U.S., an Anglo person, who did take him in and fed him and helped him get further north, away from the border. And now, after a year or maybe a little more in the U.S., he had to come back because of a death in the family. So we asked why, if he would go back again and face death and all this uncertainty. I have to, he said. And so later on I talked to him through an interpreter, and he told me more of the story. And I was moved by it to hear it firsthand, because I'd read so many horror stories of what it's like for the migrants to cross the desert and be shot like rabbits, and they're not even counted, the bodies and the people that disappear. And so I took off my Via Campesina hat, my red cap here. It's MST, but it's the Landless Workers of Brazil. I have a number of those caps because I run into these people, a lot of international gatherings. And as I gave it to him, he pulled off this sombrero and gave it to me. So I hang this on my wall and wear it once in a while. There's the biggest dairy cooperative in the United States is DFA, Dairy Farmers of America. They are not a cooperative. They're using a cooperative legal rights, but they're corporate run, and they and Dean's Foods, well, they're all so meshed, and they keep merging and so on. And foremost in Baraboo and Reedsburg, they are run by the same people, and the Kraft is one of the main players. And milk, the price of milk is set, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, on the price that they decide for that day is going to be the price of a 40-pound block of cheese, which amounts to maybe 2% of the milk in the United States. We've been dairy products short in the United States for 12 years. We're importing more than we're exporting. So whenever the price gets going up a little bit, they export or import a lot from India. Is one of the biggest ones. It's the biggest dairy producing country in the world. And we were importing from the Ukraine, Chernobyl region, of dry milk products, and countries we didn't think even had dairy cows. So every 17th of April, or close by, a working day, Family Farm Defenders organizes a protest in front of the CME in Chicago. And so 3 years ago, we got them to allow us to, some of us, 3 people, to go in and present what we wanted to their board. And so they dressed up and they went up, so the rest of us stayed outside in college suits and otherwise, and handed out leaflets. At first we drew huge amounts of police. They thought we were going to riot and burn some cars or something. And so yeah, that brought a lot of press, which was good. So we always alert the police before we go, because we know people in Chicago that support it. And so that helps. And so anyway, these guys went up, and the meeting started. Oh, they smiled benignly at these dumb farmers, that came to see them. And as time went on, and they said, well, we know that Kraft, and sometimes Kraft or sometimes DFA are the only bidders. So they bet how soon they can, under 5 minutes, set the price of cheese. And he said the smiles just disappeared off the faces. They knew their inside jokes. But that price then goes to Europe, the European Union, immediately. And from there it goes all over the world. So we set the world price of milk is set in Chicago right now. And it could be whatever Kraft wants to make that quarter, or DFA, or they collude. That influences our price. And it's always down, because they want to make, they're so greedy, they want more and more profits. Kraft, I watch their quarterlies, and their biggest earnings are always when our price goes down. They decide, not only Kraft, but all these transnationals. When I'm overseas, I was in Brittany in March, France, an international interim meeting between the big Via Campesina meetings, and they talked of how there are transnational, they call them the TNCs, the transnational police. They have transnational police that are brutalizing these indigenous people and the poor people all over Africa and South America and Asia. And it's beginning to happen here in a different manner. In fact, they're criminalizing dissent of all kinds, any kind of dissent. And so far, well, it's happening here, but it's in a manner that it's a little hard to describe, but they're making it illegal to do a lot of things that we could do before, legally. All of those people understand because we work together, and I keep telling them it's the price is set at the CME. And now they understand that, and so they say we've got to all work together to curb the power of the TNCs, because they are more powerful than many, many nations, and right now they're as powerful as the U.S. But our local group now is sponsoring free meals, all local, and now all the meals have to be, that are done in the Lutheran Church in Reedsburg, have to be local. And so, and then we started a farmer's market in Lime Ridge, which is on Wednesday. And we've, local hospitals, we're working with all of them. And the Sauk Prairie School is buying a lot of produce. They got a big grant to buy local, and they're just thrilled with it. Sweet corn by the truckload almost, because of the large school. And so there, all these opportunities are here, and we have to have this local to get around what's happening nationally and internationally. And that's what I've learned all over the world. There are such excellent models, just tremendous models, that I see in Africa and Asia and all over South America and Central America, and some in Canada too, that work. It's tremendous friendships and a sense of community. It's building, they said, that we're building community, these people will all of a sudden say. We're building community. And that's the answer to a lot of what's the economic and social problems of the world.